Imagine waking up to a world where the balance of nature no longer exists, where the birds in the sky are no longer singing songs of life, but cawing in grotesque, unnatural rhythms, their eyes glazed with hunger beyond reason. Where the forest, once a sanctuary of calm, has become a hunting ground, every rustle in the underbrush a potential death sentence. What would you do in that moment, standing at the edge of a world that has turned against you? Humanity has always believed it could control nature, bend it, harvest it, and survive. But what happens when the food web itself becomes the predator? When every creature, from the smallest insect to the apex predator, is infected, reanimated, driven by a virus that does not discriminate and does not rest. This is not a story of zombies in the streets of cities, of mindless hordes of the dead. This is a story of the wild. A story of the forests, rivers, plains, and mountains turning into a theater of unimaginable horror. It starts subtly, almost imperceptibly. Birds that no longer flee when humans approach. Deer that move in stiff, jerky motions, their eyes fixed and unblinking, their bodies twitching as if controlled by an unseen force. The apex predators, wolves and big cats, do not hunt for survival, but for dominance, for the sheer pleasure of the chase. Their instincts amplified into something almost alien. And below them, scavengers, like crows and rats, move in eerie synchronization, following trails of death, feeding not only on carrion, but on the very living, spreading infection deeper into every corner of the ecosystem. What would you do if the forest itself became a predator? If you could no longer tell which shadows are safe and which harbor the infected hunger of life gone wrong? Humans, as resourceful as we are, begin to fight back. Researchers study the patterns, trying to understand the virus that now courses through every link in the food web. They discover that the infection is unique, almost unnervingly intelligent. It adapts. Predators that would normally never cross paths begin hunting together, forming packs and alliances that defy the natural order. Rivers, once teeming with harmless fish, now carry the virus downstream, infecting creatures that feed on them and creating a chain reaction of aggression. Imagine standing on a riverbank, watching the surface ripple with what seems like ordinary fish, only to see them leap, latching onto birds or unsuspecting deer, spreading the infection in violent arcs of chaos. Could you survive in a world where even the smallest creature might kill you? The collapse of traditional hunting and agriculture is swift. Crops are trampled by flocks of ravenous, infected birds. Herds of zombie deer or cattle roam freely, tearing through fences and settlements. Predatory animals attack humans not out of hunger for food, but as vectors for the virus, ensuring that every interaction carries a potential infection. Cities near forests begin to see sporadic outbreaks, people bitten not by strangers, but by wildlife in their own backyards. The very idea of hunting for survival becomes a gamble with death. Every step into the wilderness becomes a question: do I risk searching for food, or do I starve in place? And even if you survive the forest, the infection moves with the wind, with rain, with the very cycles of life itself. Imagine the skies now, once symbols of freedom, filled with flocks of infected birds, moving in dissonant formations, screeching in unnatural harmony. At night, their calls echo across mountains and valleys, a chorus that chills even the bravest heart. Wolves prowl not singly, but in coordinated packs that can flank humans with terrifying precision. Bears that should hibernate roam cities searching for prey. Even insects, mosquitoes, ants, spiders act as carriers, bridging the gap between species, carrying the infection from one animal to another, slowly rewriting the rules of survival. What do you do when the enemy is everywhere, yet invisible until it strikes? How do you hide when the very air carries danger? Humanity attempts containment. Wildlife reserves become quarantines, but they are quickly overrun. Zoos, once sanctuaries for observation, turn into laboratories of horror. Animals infected from the outside break cages, spreading the virus to neighboring enclosures. Primate populations, now altered in ways both horrifying and intelligent, observe humans with curiosity and malice, mimicking tactics they witness. They use tools, they strategize, they learn. And humans, armed only with conventional weapons and fear, struggle to keep pace. What would it feel like to watch an animal, once your companion, once your study subject, turn the tables on you, using instinct sharpened into cunning? The food web begins to collapse entirely. Predator and prey dynamics vanish, replaced by chaos. Deer that were once herbivores attack small mammals and even birds. Wolves hunt not to eat, but to infect. The concept of survival of the fittest no longer applies because fitness has been redefined by infection. And humans, sitting atop the old food chain, find themselves at the bottom. Cities attempt barricades, but the virus is relentless. Parks and green spaces become hunting grounds. The very cycle of predation becomes a mirror of a nightmare, one where every link in the chain is compromised. What would you sacrifice to survive when nature itself is no longer a backdrop but an active enemy? In rural areas, communities try to defend themselves with fences, traps, and firearms. But the wildlife evolves faster than humans can adapt. A simple trap that catches one infected creature teaches the rest of the group. Packs of wolves coordinate, birds communicate over long distances, and infected primates use tools to disable human defenses. Humans begin to realize that brute force is useless. Strategy, speed, and unpredictability become their only weapons. But even then, luck plays a role. One misstep, one noisy corner, and an entire settlement can be overrun. Imagine sitting in a fortified cabin, listening to the sound of snapping branches, the rustle of grass, and knowing with certainty that something is out there thinking, planning, waiting. Would you leave or stay? Supply chains collapse entirely. Food becomes scarce. Humans are forced to forage deeper into infected territory. What was once wilderness is now deathly territory. Rivers are tainted, forests are no longer safe, and the night is dominated by creatures that have adapted perfectly to the virus. The concept of safe passage disappears. Even domesticated animals, once companions, become carriers or fall victim to the infection, leaving humans more isolated than ever. Every bite, every scratch, every contact is potentially fatal. And yet, humanity persists, clinging to survival, a fragile thread against the relentless tide of nature turned monstrous. The emotional toll is immense. Communities fracture. Families turn against each other in desperation. Some see the infected wildlife as divine punishment for humanity's hubris. Others form cults, worshiping the chaos, believing that submission is the only path to survival. Loneliness becomes a constant companion. Every human interaction is measured, suspicious, and fleeting. And still, amid this despair, ingenuity shines. Humans learn to manipulate the virus's patterns, use natural barriers to their advantage, and even begin to reclaim territory slowly, carefully. But the cost is immense, and the fear never fades. Could you endure a lifetime knowing that outside your shelter, the world itself is alive with malevolence? Global efforts to understand and reverse the infection yield shocking revelations. The virus, it seems, has merged with the ecosystems themselves, embedding in soil, water, and even plant life. It is no longer a disease, it is an evolution, a predator that spans species and habitats. And yet, in this terrifying complexity, humans see potential strategies. Certain zones remain uninfected due to environmental factors, such as high altitude, dry climates, or isolated ecosystems. And slowly, humanity begins to migrate, learning to read the land, anticipate the infected, and survive by thinking like their adversaries. But at what cost? At what cost does survival come when the planet itself is a labyrinth of hunters? In cities that were once hubs of civilization, decay dominates. Skyscrapers are draped in vines and moss, streets cracked and flooded, wild animals roaming freely. The soundscape is no longer human. It is the rustle of infected leaves, the low growls of predators, the screeches of birds whose calls once signaled dawn but now announce terror. And humanity, once supreme, now exists in pockets of light amidst overwhelming darkness. Every journey is a gamble, every meal a risk, every breath an act of defiance. Can we call ourselves masters of the world when the world itself has turned predator? And yet, in the midst of despair, a strange sense of reflection emerges. The virus, the infection, the chaos it forces humans to understand the delicate balance of life, the fragility of ecosystems, and the consequences of our interference. Water, soil, air, and every living thing are interconnected in ways we barely understood before. Survival is no longer about domination, but about respect, observation, and adaptation. What lessons will humanity carry forward when the food web itself has become both adversary and teacher? As the sun rises over a ravaged landscape, casting long shadows across forests and rivers teeming with life, twisted, changed, but alive humans stand at a threshold. The struggle against the infected wildlife food webs is far from over. Every day brings new challenges, new horrors, new discoveries. But perhaps, in the tension between fear and wonder, destruction and survival, we begin to understand the resilience not just of humanity, but of life itself. Could the very thing that nearly destroyed us teach us how to live again? Could we emerge wiser, more attuned to the rhythm of a planet that demands balance? Ultimately, this is a story not of victory or defeat, but of perspective. The virus may have rewritten the rules of predation, the wildlife may have become hunters in unimaginable ways, and humans may be forced to confront the terrifying truth that we are not at the top of the food chain. But within this struggle lies an unspoken truth. Life, in all its forms, adapts. It survives. And in observing its intricate, horrifying, and miraculous web, perhaps humanity will finally see its place, not as rulers, but as participants in a world far grander, more unpredictable, and more terrifying than we ever imagined. Because when the food web itself becomes a weapon and the wild itself fights back, we are reminded that survival is not a right, it is earned, every day, with courage, ingenuity, and the humility to recognize that the earth does not belong to us, we belong to it. And the struggle against zombie wildlife is the ultimate testament to that truth. What would you do if tomorrow the forest itself turned hunter? Would you run, hide, or stand your ground? And when the sun sets over a world rewritten by infection, would you survive or simply witness?